Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when a sharp-tongued comedian meets a strong-willed legal analyst? Sparks fly. On The View, Ricky Gervais sat across from Sunny Hostin for what was supposed to be a policy discussion on retirement savings. But when the topic turned to whether retirement accounts should be completely tax-free, the polite atmosphere quickly collapsed. Sunny wanted balance, Ricky wanted bluntness, and America got a debate that had both the audience and his co-hosts gasping. By the end, Ricky looked into the camera, tossed out one last cutting line, and declared, "I'm done with this show." Then he walked right off the set.
The morning started like any other on The View. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward at the table, introducing the topic with her signature measured calm. Today we're asking the question, should retirement savings accounts be completely tax-free? Her eyes darted across the table where Sunny Hostin sat, posture perfect, and where Ricky Gervais lounged with that smirk he seemed to carry everywhere. The audience clapped politely, though everyone knew, when you put Ricky in the middle of a political conversation, polite doesn't last long. Ricky wasted no time. "I'll tell you what I think. Governments already bleed people dry their whole lives. You pay taxes on your paycheck, on your house, on your food, on your death, and now, after 40 years of work, they want another cut from your retirement? It's basically a tax for daring to live too long." The audience burst into laughter, half shocked and half thrilled. Joy Behar leaned back, grinning. "That's dark, Ricky, but not entirely wrong." Sunny straightened, her lawyerly tone kicking in immediately. "Well, Ricky, it's not that simple. Retirement accounts can't just be completely tax-free. That would cost the government trillions in revenue. And that revenue is what pays for public schools, infrastructure, social services, things people rely on." Ricky didn't flinch. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing in mock seriousness. "So let me get this straight. You want Grandma, who's worked her whole life, to keep paying so that the potholes get filled. Or better yet, so the politicians can have their fancy lunches. That's not fairness. That's daylight robbery." The audience roared. Sunny pushed back, her voice steady. "You're ignoring the fact that wealthy people exploit these accounts. They put away millions, get massive breaks, and the rest of society pays the price. It's not about punishing Grandma. It's about balance." Ricky chuckled, leaning forward. "Balance? I'll give you balance. Stop pretending this is about billionaires. This is about the man who drove a bus for 40 years and now has to choose between heating his house or paying taxes on his own savings. That's who gets hurt, not your hedge fund guy. He's already on a yacht." Ana Navarro jumped in, trying to cool things down. "Maybe there's a middle ground here. Some protection for ordinary people, but limits for the ultra-rich." Ricky wagged a finger playfully. "See? Ana gets it. It's not rocket science. Protect the people who need protecting. Don't punish everyone just because some millionaire found a loophole." Sunny, though, wasn't letting him off. She leaned across the table, her tone sharpening. "You're a comedian, Ricky, not an economist. You can't just wave away the numbers because they don't fit your narrative." The audience let out an audible, "Ooh!" Joy practically clapped her hands at the tension. "This is getting good." Ricky laughed dryly. "You're right, Sunny. I'm not an economist, but I am a human being with common sense. And common sense says you don't rob people at the finish line of their lives." Whoopi sighed, already sensing where this was headed. "Let's not get personal." But Ricky cut her off with a cheeky grin. "I'm not getting personal, Whoopi. I'm just saying if the government took less of people's money, maybe they wouldn't have to squeeze the elderly like lemons." The crowd clapped and whistled. Sunny crossed her arms. "And what happens to the children in underfunded schools when that money disappears? What happens to communities that rely on federal programs? You can't just pretend the money grows on trees." Ricky shot back immediately, his delivery sharp as a knife. "Funny you should say that, because whenever they need money for wars, bailouts, or their own salaries, the money does grow on trees. But when it comes to old people keeping what's theirs, suddenly the tree's bare." That line landed like a punch. The studio erupted with applause. Joy laughed so hard she slapped the table, and even Whoopi couldn't hide a faint smile. Sunny, though, was stone-faced. That's not policy, Ricky. That's a punchline. And people deserve more than punchlines when we're talking about national budgets. The tension was clear now. This wasn't just banter. This was the opening spark of something much bigger. The audience leaned in, knowing full well the debate had only just begun. By the second segment, the studio air felt heavier. The polite laughter from the audience had shifted into gasps, bursts of applause, and even a few uneasy murmurs. Everyone could sense this wasn't going to be just another talk show debate. Sunny Hostin adjusted her chair and locked eyes on Ricky. Her voice carried the kind of weight that comes from years in the courtroom. Here's the truth, Ricky. If you strip away taxes entirely from retirement accounts, you're giving a free ride to people who don't need it. The rich would stash billions, pass it on untouched, and leave ordinary taxpayers carrying the load. That's not justice. That's inequality. Ricky let out a laugh that sounded almost like disbelief. Sonny, you keep saying the rich like they're lurking under everyone's bed. I've got news for you. Most seniors aren't billionaires. They're people like your mom, your uncle, your neighbor, people who spent decades doing the right thing. You want to penalize them because somewhere out there a hedge fund guy found a tax loophole? Joy Behar jumped in, stirring the pot. Ricky's got a point. My cousin Vinny's been driving a cab for 30 years. The guy don't own a yacht. He don't even own a garage. He's worried his Social Security check and his savings won't stretch. And you're telling me Uncle Sam deserves a cut of that too? Fuck about it. The audience howled, clapping in agreement. Sunny didn't flinch. She leaned forward, tone sharper. I'm not saying we punish the working class, Joy, but let's not be naive. Public money has to come from somewhere. And if everyone gets a tax holiday, what happens to health care funding? What happens to veterans programs? What happens to the most vulnerable who actually need government support? Ricky tilted his head, smirk still firmly in place. And what happens to the seniors who are the most vulnerable? You're acting like old age is some luxury vacation. These people are already cutting coupons, already deciding between medication and groceries, and the government solution is, hey, let's skim a little more off the top. Forgive me if I think that's disgusting. The crowd erupted again. Applause, whistles, even a standing cheer from one man in the back. Anna Navarro, trying to play peacemaker, raised her hand. Okay, let's acknowledge something. Ricky's right about seniors feeling squeezed. Sunny's right about billionaires exploiting loopholes. Maybe the answer isn't black and white. Maybe it's a tiered system. Protect the everyday worker's savings, but cap the benefits for the ultra-rich. Whoopi nodded. That sounds like compromise to me. But Ricky shook his head, wagging his finger. Compromise? That's just a fancy word for half fair, half unfair. Imagine telling a mugger, hey, don't take all my money, just half of it. You'd still be robbed. Seniors deserve full protection, not some watered-down middle ground. The audience cheered again, but Sunny's expression hardened. This is where you lose me, Ricky. You reduce real policy to jokes about muggers, and people cheer because it sounds simple. But the world isn't simple. If you create blanket exemptions, the system collapses. It's not about robbing seniors, it's about keeping the country afloat. Ricky shot back immediately. Oh, come on. Keeping the country afloat? That's the line they've been feeding people forever. Yet somehow, when it comes to corporate bailouts or endless wars or tax breaks for the already wealthy, the country is magically afloat. But when it comes to letting a 75-year-old keep her retirement savings, suddenly we're sinking? Give me a break. Joy leaned in, laughing so hard she nearly spilled her mug. You got to admit, Sunny, he's got you there. Sunny raised her chin. What he's got is a good punchline, but jokes don't fund schools. Punchlines don't repair roads, and laughter doesn't cover the costs of keeping millions of Americans cared for. Ricky spread his hands, mock serious. But it does keep us sane while the government robs us blind. Maybe that's why they hate comedians so much. We point out the obvious. The tension rippled across the table. The audience was fully locked in, divided between applause for Ricky's blunt attacks and murmured agreement with Sunny's calls for responsibility. Anna tried again. But Ricky, what about the future? If we gut tax revenue now, don't younger generations suffer later? Ricky leaned back in his chair. You know what makes younger generations suffer? Watching their parents and grandparents struggle after working themselves into the ground. Watching the people who raised them treated like burdens. If you want to inspire younger generations, show them that hard work actually gets rewarded, not siphoned away until the end. A few audience members stood, clapping, nodding. The momentum was tilting toward Ricky, and everyone on stage could feel it. Sunny's voice rose, cutting through the noise. That's not reward, Ricky. That's reckless. You can't run a nation on applause lines. You need real solutions. Ricky leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Maybe the real solution is this. Stop pretending the government owns people's money. Stop acting like seniors should be grateful to get crumbs back from a pie they baked themselves. That's not reckless, that's justice. The room shook with cheers. Sunny sat back, lips pressed into a tight line. The sparks that had started earlier were now a roaring fire. Everyone knew this clash was far from over.
By the third segment, the conversation wasn't just heated, it was blistering. What had started as a sharp debate about retirement savings had turned into something more personal, more raw. The audience leaned forward in their seats as if they were watching a courtroom showdown rather than a morning talk show. Sunny's tone hardened, her lawyer instinct taking over. You keep using words like robbery and muggers, Ricky. But let's be clear, taxes are the price we pay for civilization. You don't get police, firefighters, Medicare, Social Security itself without taxes. So when you say seniors shouldn't contribute a dime, what you're really saying is you want services without responsibility. That's not justice. That's selfish. Ricky's smirk dropped. For the first time, he looked genuinely stung. Selfish? You're calling 70 and 80-year-olds selfish because they want to keep their own savings? These are the people who built the very civilization you're talking about. They already paid in. They already gave the government their blood, sweat, and taxes for decades. And now when they finally want to rest, you're wagging your finger and calling them greedy? A wave of applause broke out, loud and sustained. Sunny pressed on, unshaken. What about the single mother who can't afford childcare because the tax base shrinks? What about veterans depending on housing programs? What about communities devastated by underfunded infrastructure? If we exempt everyone's retirement accounts, those burdens shift somewhere else. The math doesn't disappear just because you don't like it. Ricky jabbed his finger at the table. And what about the grandma who can't buy insulin because she's choosing between paying her rent and paying her taxes? What about the retired steel worker who spent 40 years inhaling smoke and now gets told, sorry mate, the country needs your pension to fix potholes? We always find money for wars, for Wall Street, for politicians' perks, but the moment seniors ask to keep their own money, suddenly we're broke? That's hypocrisy. The crowd roared in agreement, clapping and shouting. Even Whoopi raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed with Ricky's conviction. Joy Behar leaned back, enjoying the drama. You know, Sunny, he's making it sound like you're telling Grandma to pay for a tank. Sunny gave Joy a sharp look, then turned back to Ricky. Her voice shook now, not with fear, but with intensity. This isn't about tanks, Joy. This is about responsibility. Ricky, you make millions telling jokes. Do you honestly believe you should get the same treatment as a janitor scraping by with $2,000 a month in retirement savings? Be honest. Ricky didn't miss a beat. No, I believe the janitor should be left alone entirely. And if I've got millions in my retirement, fine, tax that if you must. But don't lump the janitor in with me. Don't punish ordinary seniors because you're afraid of people like me benefiting. Protect them first. The audience clapped again, though a smaller group cheered Sunny's point. The divide was clear, like a fault line splitting the room. Sunny's jaw tightened. So you admit the wealthy should be taxed, but you're still packaging it like everyone's the same victim. That's misleading. That's why this whole argument of yours is dangerous. It simplifies a complex issue into cheap slogans. You're selling outrage, not policy. Ricky's voice dropped lower. his British accent cutting through with raw emphasis. "And you're selling fear, Sunny. Fear that if we don't keep taking, the whole country collapses. Fear that ordinary people can't be trusted with their own money. Fear that freedom will destroy us. You call it complex, I call it condescending." That line hit hard. Gasps echoed in the studio, and the cameras caught Sunny's face tightening further. Anna Navarro stepped in, clearly nervous. "All right, maybe we need to remember this is morning television, not Gladiator. Let's breathe a little." But Ricky wasn't pulling back. "You know why I'm fired up? Because I've seen the faces of pensioners, of retirees who feel invisible. They don't care about lofty policy debates. They care about whether they can eat dinner tonight. And when you call them selfish, you spit in their faces. That's why people cheer when I say let them keep their money, because deep down everyone knows they've earned it." The audience shot to their feet, some clapping, others shouting in approval. The studio was buzzing like a live wire. Sunny leaned forward, eyes blazing. "And I'll tell you why I'm fired up, Ricky, because if you dismantle tax policy with a broad brush, you destroy the very safety nets that keep millions alive. You don't build justice by gutting the system. You don't protect the vulnerable by creating holes so wide that the greedy walk right through. You want fairness? Fairness means balance, not slogans." Her words cut through the cheers, and for a moment the crowd quieted, weighing the clash. Ricky and Sunny were staring each other down now, both refusing to blink. Whoopi finally broke the silence. "Well, America, you heard it. Ricky says justice is leaving senior savings untouchable. Sunny says justice is shared responsibility, and judging by this crowd, the jury's still out." The audience erupted again, divided but electrified. At that moment, it wasn't just a TV debate. It was a battle over dignity, over survival, over what fairness in America really means, and neither side was letting go.
By the time the conversation entered its fourth round, the atmosphere in the studio was volatile. The crowd had gone from polite applause to vocal shouts. The co-hosts were practically talking over one another, and Ricky Gervais looked like a man about to snap. Whoopi raised her hands, trying to calm the storm. "All right, let's take this one at a time. Ricky, finish your thought, then Sunny can respond." But Ricky was already leaning forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Here's the bottom line. If you tax seniors' retirement savings, you are punishing people for being alive too long. That's what it boils down to. They've already paid into the system for decades, they've already done their share, and now you're saying, well, sorry, we still need more from you. It's exploitation, pure and simple." The audience erupted with cheers, some even shouting, "That's right," from the seats. Sunny quickly countered, her hand slicing the air. "Exploitation? No, Ricky. What's exploitation is leaving millions of vulnerable seniors with nothing because we've gutted the tax base. Do you think nursing homes, elder health care programs, and senior housing just fund themselves? No, they're funded by taxes, by everyone. You want dignity for seniors, then you need collective responsibility." The studio split into factions, half applauding Sunny's point, half backing Ricky. The tension was palpable. Joy Behar, ever the stirrer, leaned into her mic. "So let me get this straight. Ricky's saying the government has no right to touch retirement accounts. Sunny's saying the government has to in order to provide services. That's a stalemate, isn't it? One side says freedom, the other says fairness." Ana Navarro jumped in, nodding toward Ricky. "But Ricky, aren't you overlooking the fact that not all seniors are wealthy? Some of these tax breaks disproportionately help millionaires, not the everyday grandma you keep talking about." Ricky turned sharply toward her, his face flushed. "And I just said, take it from the millionaires. Fine, tax me, touch the bloody Hollywood elites, I don't care. But stop stealing from people who barely have enough to live on. You know what I call that? Kicking a man when he's down, and it makes me sick." The audience roared again, some rising to their feet. Ricky's voice was louder now, more raw. He wasn't joking anymore. Sunny leaned across the table, her eyes locked on him. "And you know what makes me sick, Ricky? People with your platform painting complex issues as black and white, whipping up outrage without offering solutions. Do you have a plan, or are you just here to yell at the government? The remark hit hard. A sharp gasp swept through the audience. Ricky's face reddened. A plan? My plan is simple. Stop taxing seniors into poverty. You don't need a 400-page policy memo to understand that. Sunny pressed on. But you're ignoring the ripple effects. You slash taxes, you cut funding. You cut funding, you cut programs. And when that happens, seniors suffer in a different way, through lack of health care, lack of support, lack of housing. You're selling false hope. The two were practically shouting now, their voices clashing over each other. Wilby tried to intervene, but Ricky slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. The studio fell silent. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder. You want to talk about suffering. Let me tell you something. I've seen seniors in Britain and in America forced to choose between heating their homes and buying food. I've seen pensioners break down in tears because their savings vanished while bureaucrats shrugged. And you want to call that fair? You want to call them selfish? No. What's selfish is defending a system that grinds people into dust while politicians pat themselves on the back. The audience shot to its feet, clapping and cheering so loudly it drowned out the rest of the panel. Cameras caught people in the crowd wiping their eyes. Sunny tried to respond, her voice rising, but Ricky cut her off. No, I'm done. I've said my piece. If you can't see the cruelty in taxing people who've already paid their dues, then there's nothing left to say. He tore off his mic, the wires dangling as he stood. The studio gasped, a collective "oh" filling the air. Whoopi held out a hand. Ricky, sit down. Let's finish this. But Ricky shook his head, his face a mask of frustration. I'm done with this show. I'm done with this debate. You lot can keep shouting about balance and fairness while real people suffer. I'm not playing this game anymore. With that, he strode off the set, leaving his chair empty and the audience buzzing in shock. Sunny sat back, breathing hard, her expression a mix of victory and disbelief. The other co-hosts exchanged stunned looks, and Whoopi muttered under her breath, Well, that just happened. The cameras lingered on Ricky's empty seat as the audience clapped uncertainly, divided and unsettled. The clash had reached its breaking point, and the fallout was only beginning.
The studio was still vibrating with energy long after Ricky Gervais stormed off. The audience had witnessed something they didn't expect from a morning talk show. A clash that wasn't just heated, but seismic. The panel sat in stunned silence for a moment before Whoopi Goldberg tried to bring order back. Well, folks, I don't think anybody saw that coming, she said with a wry chuckle, though her eyes betrayed the tension still lingering in the room. Some audience members applauded Ricky's passion, while others booed his abrupt exit. A group in the front row shouted, "He's right!" while another muttered, "That was unprofessional." The division was clear. Sunny Hostin, still visibly tense, straightened her papers and said firmly, "I stand by what I said. Taxes aren't theft. They're the only reason seniors even have programs like Social Security and Medicare. If we want dignity for older Americans, we need to protect the system, not dismantle it." Her words earned polite applause, but the roar that followed Ricky's walkout still echoed. Joy Behar, always quick with a quip, leaned towards Sunny. "Well, you've officially scared Ricky Gervais out of the country. Congratulations!" The audience laughed nervously, breaking some of the tension. Outside the studio, the fallout was immediate. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips of Ricky slamming his hand on the table and declaring, "I'm done with this show," spread across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags like Ricky versus Sunny, hashtag Tax the Seniors debate, and hashtag The View Meltdown began trending before the episode even finished airing. Comment sections exploded with debate. One camp hailed Ricky as a hero who stood up for ordinary seniors. Finally, someone said what we're all thinking. Others accused him of oversimplifying the issue,
Storming off doesn't solve anything. Sunny's right about the bigger picture. Even late-night comedians began weighing in. One joked, Ricky Gervais left The View the same way I leave Thanksgiving dinner, angry, dramatic, and way too early. But beyond the jokes, the clash struck a nerve. Retirement, fairness, and dignity for seniors weren't abstract policy questions anymore. They were front and center, embodied in Ricky's raw frustration and Sunny's fierce defense of the system. As the episode wrapped, Whoopi closed with a line that captured the moment perfectly. Love 'em or hate 'em, Ricky made sure we're all thinking about how we treat our seniors. And maybe that's the point. The empty chair Ricky left behind became a symbol, not just of a celebrity storming off, but of a debate America still hasn't resolved.